We are Southern Illinois.
Henderson into the lane, lost it, stolen away. Haynes up ahead. Southern can do a 2-for-1. Lobbed it up to Mayo, laid it in on the low left block.
It's time for Saluki basketball.
Mayo still with the basketball, fading away with 3, and Mayo's unconscious now. Damian Mayo's got 11 in the second half, 15 in the game. Give number 10 the ball.
Now, here is the voice of the Salukis, Luke Martin.
Welcome back, Saluki Nation, to the Saluki Radio Basketball Podcast as we preview the Drake Bulldogs here on Wednesday night in Banterra Center. After, just a weekend off. Feels like a month after all these games in a row for the Salukis. And even though it was Christmas break, this break felt much longer than that in a weird way, seeing everybody play over the weekend. But your radio crew's right back at it with the Hall of Famer Rodney Watson. I am Luke Martin. We have Eric Henderson, who's going to stop by and join us on the podcast today. Coach Henderson, it's his first year as the head coach at Drake. And, man, what a success story it's been for Drake. Of course, 3 straight NCAA tournaments, which means the expectations always are high there. But that's a guy who's a proven winner and has shown it, ironically, at the school where Scott Nagy used to coach in South Dakota State. We'll talk about that storyline, how both of them were so successful in Brookings. But before we do that, let's welcome in the Hall of Famer, Rodney Watson. Coach, good to see you. Man, this past weekend for me was odd. I was like turning on the games. I'm like, man, I got to get to the arena. Coach Watson's going to beat me to the arena like he always does to set up all the equipment. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, hey, we don't have a game. And, man, there were some good ones this weekend, brother.
The league continues to impress in terms of just how the parity, the equality, and pretty much talent. Speaking of talent, this week it flew by for me, and I got a feeling it flew by for the Salukis getting ready for this incredible stretch run we'll talk a lot about. But had a chance to go see the Pacers play. I keep talking about this league that we broadcast for, and it's not bragging, it's not an opinion. We're the 9th best league in the country. We've got to come to grips with that. And the reason for that net rating is because of the talent. Pacers play the Miami Heat. You got Ben Shepherd. You heard me talk a lot about a Missouri Valley disciple, and Drew Smith, who played 2 years with Evansville. Two Missouri Valley players on the court at the same time in an NBA game. And then you go back to your lead-in about how good this weekend was, and you have different teams winning, and it's not surprising. And, UIC continues to from where they left off with a great win at Illinois State. It's not because they were 5-10 before our game. It's not because they're a bad team. It's just they hadn't figured it out quite yet. But believe me, they're starting to figure out their identity.
I think to your point, I want to build off of that before we, of course, get into the Saluki perspective and the loss to UIC, which was very disappointing from an SIU angle. But, man, I think it goes along the lines of how well coached these teams are in the league. But you watch a lot of games, Coach Watson, and UIC knows who they are. And I was listening to our good friend John Fitzgerald. I was listening to the game as I was out on my walk around campus. I wasn't watching it, but just listening to Fitz describe it, it's like, yeah, UIC is playing the way they want to play. They're not playing out of their minds. But you look at a lot of teams, Drake, who we're going to see on Wednesday night, they were down 30 to Bradley on the road. And within not even a week's time, they're up 25 on Belmont. There are so many teams in our league that I think when things are going well, they know what their identity is. Maybe not fully, and that's part of the whole season development, but you see so many well-coached teams within this league, Coach Watson, and that was a talking point that me and Steve Hawkins had on the coaches show this week, it's not just the talent, because let me tell you, Tyler Lundblade, you're going to see him in the NBA. That is an NBA caliber player. Would not surprise me to see Roman Doman at some point down the road be another guy that's going to be capable. There are multiple guys in this league that have extreme talent, but that's why I love doing this league and calling these games. And I've had the fortunate opportunity to do it at 2 different institutions. It's to see really teams that don't get out of their box too much. Teams sometimes will still do that, but for the most part, this is a league where teams know what their identity is.
Yeah, when we talked to Rob Eson after that interview, I felt less good about that game after talking to him and about him knowing who they are. We talked about their rebounding ability, their offensive rebounding. I was trying to jinx him every which way I could, and he was just laughing about it. And then we talked about their free throws and think about the two factors just in that game because they know who they are. They didn't come out and try to do something different against SIU. They're blue collar. They're not worried about being sexy, and it really proved out for them this week. The part that continues to impress me in our league, Luke, is just the number from grad students to freshmen and the depth in this league. I'm really impressed with how coaches are understanding that in the grind of a 20-game league schedule, that you've got to have depth for a couple reasons. One, I think about some players that we broadcast for, and they played heavy minutes. And undoubtedly, late in February, in March, it shows up.
Xavier Johnson, great example.
Yeah, had that problem myself, though, Luke. I had that problem. I had to have an intervention. My assistant coaches literally had an intervention with me late in February saying, you are wearing our dudes out because you don't trust 8 and 9. And it was one of the best things that helped me retire happy because those guys had the courage to tell their boss, quote unquote, man, we got to make this adjustment. These coaches do it. Again, talented freshman, so hard to play. Jalen Haynes, we talk about him a lot. And, he hit a little blip, maybe for whatever reason, maybe a scouting report, maybe whatever. But man, he's come back and playing terrific basketball as a first-year guy. Not easy to do. I don't care if you're 18 or 19. Very tough to go against scouting reports when you get recruited. And no disrespect to anybody. They're a great high school. We're going to play against a Drake team that's got guys coming from two excellent high school basketball teams. Quinn from Tuscola and Thomas that was at Whitney Young. Great high school basketball. Ask the point guard with the Knicks how good Whitney Young is. And but the point is the scouting, the preparation, the physicality is so different when you go from high school travel ball situation up to a 40-minute game on a 94-foot floor as a young person. And these young guys are a treat to watch.
You look at the league standings before we talk about the Salukis here. Murray State right now nearing the halfway point. They're still unbeaten. They're 7-0 in the league. And then look at this group of teams with 2 losses. Belmont, Bradley, Illinois State, UNI, all with 2 losses in the league. Illinois State, Northern Iowa only have 4 wins. Bradley and Belmont each right now with 5 wins right behind Murray State. And then you have that next group, which the Salukis are in at 2 and 4. It's SIU, UIC, Drake, and Valpo. And keep in mind, when Valpo and UIC played each other after Valpo saw the Salukis, both those teams were winless. And now all of a sudden, Valpo, they beat Illinois State. Of course, UIC, they win 2 in a row. Now they're right in that grouping with SIU just 2 games back relatively in the loss column of that next group. And then Indiana State right now, they are 1-5 and 10th. And then Evansville, who just beat Indiana State 1-6. I think a great example of what we were just talking about. Evansville went on the road and they beat Indiana State. Indiana State, you watched the Sycamores this year. Their offense is really good, and they run tremendous stuff on that side. And look, their record I know is not where they want it, and it's so great to see Coach Graves back on the sideline as he started to get back on the sideline early January as the head guy again. They're going to give teams fits. It would not surprise me, and this may blow back in my face, which won't be the first time it does. But I'm telling you, that game for Illinois State on the road in Terre Haute is not going to be easy for them. And Indiana State is going to make them work, and especially after the Sycamores got pummeled in Sefq Arena earlier before that winter break. And it's not coach speak, Watson. It's not broadcaster speak. It's not trying to make something out of nothing. This will be as you go throughout the year, you look at these games and whether you get them in your arena or you get them on the road, just like it was for us as we transitioned that UIC game last week, you and I were nervous about it. And it wasn't just because of, Rob Eson, great guy, all of that. No, it was, you knew that UIC was going to be absolutely hungry for a win. And if it got to be their style of game, that would have you nervous. And turns out that we had a right to be nervous as they won that game 70-57.
I think there's a factor. Coaching does matter, not because I did it for a living, but it does matter. And we're going to watch a national championship game on the following Monday, the 19th, where this guy, Cignetti, he has done something that's putting a lot of heat on everybody. There's articles coming out now that patience became even less for fan bases when you look at what they did. And it's no secret. Cignetti has the secret sauce, and it's not so secret. He'll tell you exactly how they go about it, and it doesn't seem to be coach speak. What's it have to do with my point with our league? You look at the coaches in our league. We have veteran coaches. We have one new coach in our league. We're going to speak to him, and Eric Henderson, and then the rest of the coaches, by and large, aren't on their first go-around. Ben Jacobson is kind of an unusual situation where he's been at his school, the only head coaching job he's had, but he's had multiple people trying to lure him away. He was a very wise soul in staying pat to where he knows he can be, do what he does best. But you look at Eson's second go around. You look at Matthew Graves' second go around. I don't care what you say. When you get in that chair for the second time, you draw back on a lot of experiences. Some from coaches you worked for. Okay, in my case, a lot of that. But I was also a high school coach that. Young, didn't know what I was doing at all for 4 years, was an assistant, thought I'd have to be one the rest of my life. But man, I drew back on a lot of those times, especially in how to act on the sideline. That was a big factor in how I changed. It's like when I was a high school coach, I was giving points away by acting like an idiot and let them shoot free throws with no one else on the free throw line. And you know what I mean by that? That was stupid. And that's something I really changed along with different things. But you have to have a great staff. But I think coaching is outstanding in our league, and I think a lot has to do with just the veteranship of this coaching crew that we have in our league.
Let's dive into that SIU UIC game last week, Coach Watson. 70-57 was the final score as UIC, the biggest difference was no question. They shot 22 free throws in the game. They made 14 of their 22. Southern only had 4 free throws attempted in the game, and I think a lot of that had to do with the aggressor, no question, was UIC in the game. 15 offensive rebounds for UIC, only 5 for SIU. They won the rebounding margin by 12. 39-27, and then you mix in the turnovers were massive. Saluki's had 15 turnovers in the game. UIC only turned it over 9 times. And I give credit to the coaching staff, and I give credit to the Salukis in talking to them, and Steve Hawkins was very transparent about it on This Week at Inside Saluki Athletics. It was the first time this year, Coach Watson, where like North Dakota State, Salukis maybe mentally weren't as sharp as they should have been, but they physically fought. And they gave themselves a chance in a game like that. You even go Richmond. The boards they won the battle on the boards that game by a mile. Just the execution level wasn't quite there. What was so frustrating about the UIC game was it was clear. The physicality was not there for Southern Illinois. And a lot of that does go to whether you want to say the cliche way of effort. SIU just wasn't where it needed to be, and it showed. The numbers absolutely showed that, and I know there'll be some, didn't get a good call here, didn't get a good call there. That's going to happen in these games, but the biggest reason why SIU did not get the calls is because they, quite frankly, did not earn them with the physicality level that UIC had.
The 15-5 rule in the Hilton Company and the Hilton Hotel Company says this: within 15 feet, employees are to make eye contact with the guests. Within 5 feet, they are required to greet them with a hello or good morning. That's to make their guests feel important, okay? Now, that's the Hilton rule. The Saluki rule in 15-5 is never give up 15 offensive rebounds and only get 5. Now, that rebounding travels. Rebounding is, I've said this to you many times, and you can, not you, Luke, but anybody that's listening can believe this as much as you can. You can really tell effort in a couple of obvious ways. One, and it seems like I'm being oversimplistic, and it's not. Touch your shirt. If your shirt isn't wet, you're not playing hard enough, whether it's practice, working out, or whatever the case, certainly in the game. The other area is rebounding. Rebounding will absolutely explain effort, especially offensive rebounds. And it wasn't like they just blew up a bunch of them toward the end of the game or one segment. Man, it was going on from the start because I kept, it was obviously my number one key in this game. So my eyes were definitely on it. When that is UIC's number one strength, you've got to do something about it. And man, Southern just violated the 15-5 rule by not getting in that fight. And hopefully in that week's time, and there's ways, trust me, as a coach, you can really improve in that area. Rebounding is a skill for sure, but it has a whole lot to do with the skill being effort. And you are right on the money. That's just an area where when you're in the hunt for a championship, and we are still in a hunt for a championship, 2-4, tied for 6, all that stuff doesn't matter because there are 14 games, but as of Wednesday, there are only 42 days left for Southern. So there won't be extended practice time. But in that last week, if Southern really wants to set their identity, they've got to, number one, they have been such a good rebounding team and a physical team against teams that on paper or even in the warm-up line look like they were maybe at a disadvantage. And Southern did not bring that element. As far as the free throws go, 22-4, that's weird. But the biggest problem Southern had in the first half is they were fouling shooters in common fouls. So from 0 fouls through 6, the common fouls, which again is a testament to energy and effort, but the fouls happen on shots. And I can go back, I promise you, I could go back and watch film. I think about Jalen Haynes' turnover on the right wing in the first half when a guy bodied him basically out of bounds that caused the travel, and there was a travel call. That was a bad call. Okay, and that's an opportunity to get Southern one foul closer to getting to the free throw line. But okay, let's say it was called a foul. Southern's taking the ball out of bounds. They're not shooting free throws. And that was a big mistake Southern made as well, is that I love the way Southern played so aggressive against Belmont, but they didn't foul the shooters so much that game. Southern's got to be smarter with their energy, but the rebounding part, there's no way to candy coat that. And I'm sure that was watched to nauseam in the film session that, fellas, this is unacceptable.
Well, and if you look at on the year, 6 times Southern has been out-rebounded. 4 of the 6 times have come in league play. I think that's where the concern is, and the -12 in terms of the rebounding margin, it's the most that Southern has been out-rebounded this year. But here is what should give you hope, Coach Watson, is when you can out-rebound teams by 19 like you did at Richmond. They've had rebounding margins against most of the teams, like you said, throughout this year. But what is the part, and again, going back to what Steve Hawkins told us on Inside Saluki Athletics this week, Luke, we got to get our physicality back. It's there. This has been a team that shows that they embrace that. The numbers have shown it. But right now, it's just not where it needs to be. And it hasn't been that way since the start of league play. And we can point out, we know the first 2 league games with Illinois State, Bradley, being without Prince, no doubt made an impact, especially in the rebounding effort. But you had Prince in Chicago. Unfortunately, just that it didn't correlate to where you wanted to. But here's the other area, Coach Watson, of just looking at the numbers. And look, you can dive into so many numbers right now and see exactly where you're at. That was a concern. But to me, one of the biggest concerns right now is how SIU is generating their offense and how they're getting shots. They are dead last in the league right now in terms of their assist percentage and how many of their shots they score on assists. Now, the ironic part was the UIC game, they're actually really good in that area. The Salukis had 22 assists on their 25 made field goals. But for the most part, it's been what many would describe as iso ball. Not really sharing the basketball at a clip that you would like. That's also an area where it does seem like Southern offensively needs to improve in, because if that number stays the same, I mean, it's going to feel like it has been, which is, man, SIU's got to work awful hard to get a good shot.
Yeah, I'll come back to one small point you made about haven't shared the ball. Southern there is never an indicator that Southern is a selfish team in any respect. This team, and believe me, that's Scott Nagy driven. That's a constant. What the few practices I've been to, or the times I've been around in film session, whatever. But what's happening is Southern is relying to score off the dribble, creating their own basket far too often. Now, it stuck out to me too, Luke, the 22 assists on 25 field goals in a game Southern didn't play well in any respect. However, at 2:34, Steffi hits a three. Southern's got it to a two-possession game down 5. It's just that is the indicator that it's there. So look, this season's got a lot to it, and Southern's got a lot in their tank. Southern's got tools, man, and that's an indicator as well. But the scoring off the dribble, that also is a huge piece in game preparation, in how you're going to get guys the ball. One that sticks out to me is this. Again, more of a fan talking than certainly any type of coach or expert in this situation, but Rollins Oligbe has averaged 5.8 shots a game this season, both non-conference and also league play, like the same exact number versus whether it's a 6-game sample size or a total 17. In my fandom opinion, Rollins Oligbe's got to be a focal point in this offense. Much like House is certainly one. And that Rollins just can't come down the floor in this league where teams play really good, smart defense, and they take the arc away. They take away, or the inside the arc away. They take away the restriction arc. Southern's got to find a way to keep him moving, keep him screening, whether it's real action or false action, to get his man off of him and have him cross the lane into great scoring opportunities where he can just catch, pivot to the open side, and go score. Because when Southern gets him multiple double-digit touches in that area, you think about when we talk about this season as a matter of 3-minute games, 4-minute games, which means it's a one-possession season. Wow, I like to take my chances with Rollins Oligbe getting touches, crossing the lane, being led, getting the catch right in front, right at the restriction arc, right in front of the basket, as opposed to coming down the floor, making a pass, him going against 2 guys, knowing he's going to get a double team, and he's got to bully his way to the rim. Same way with Moreno. Moreno is a horse when he can get the ball one-on-one anywhere near the lane. He is so much longer than we, I think, even appreciate. Those are areas where Southern's got to really improve, and that comes with that requires effort and playing hard. Requires coaching, requires coaches really helping set up a plan. Another guy, quite frankly, is Drew Steffi. Drew Steffi is now shooting more threes than twos. Drew Steffi will make threes. I mean, the 3 he made gave Southern a chance to put him at 2 possessions in 2.5 minutes. If he says, you know what, I'm not making them, I'm in a funk, I'm going to do something else, I don't know where that game goes, but it's not going to be any better than the result, I can tell you that. The one area where Drew, and I commented on a lot, and again, not the expert, just a fan talking, when Drew Steffi catches the ball, when the ball has touched sides maybe 2 or 3 times, but even 2 times, possibly 1 time, and he can bring the ball back down the lane against a defense that's gone to help side and they're recovering. Man, Drew is 6'5". He's all of it. He's long. He can score at the rim. He finds open teammates. We could talk about that with with Damian Sykes. Sykes is another guy. He is so good off the baseline. Max Picar's a guy, again, get hit when he gets to the baseline and the ball is reversed. What does his man do? What he's the 10th man on the scouting report at best, okay? His man is, look, you're going to go help on Rollins Oligbe, even Prince Oligbe, certainly Moreno. Backside help will come take care of Picard. Well, backside help doesn't get there. I've been, if you can play against the backside help, and Picard is so good at the rim, those are areas where Southern's got to really create an identity of, okay, you want to take away Rollins Oligbe, and we're going to punish you on the weak side on the baseline.
That's one area that's still a unquestionable strength of them has been second chance points, opportunities in league play. They're averaging right around 12 points per game. Second chance, that's 3rd best in the league. And you look at also, again, no shocker, Points in the paint. That's where the Salukis live. They average 35 points in the paint within league games so far. That, of course, paces everybody in the league. And speaking of pace, Southern second right now in terms of pace within league games. They're right under 70 possessions a game, 69.7. That is second in the league. Let's go ahead and transition now into the opponent in the Drake Bulldogs here on Wednesday night. Coach Eric Henderson coming on, as we referred to and alluded to in our open, Coach Watson. This is a guy that has a lot in common with Scott Nagy. Both of them spent multiple years in South Dakota, in Brookings, South Dakota, at South Dakota State. This is a guy who's been to the NCAA tournament, that's had great success. And I think it's always one of those areas that you got to keep in mind of. It's been a tremendous run for Drake. And even when you go back, Nico Medved, who's now in the Big Ten at Minnesota, he was there for 1 year, was more success than they've had in recent years prior to that. Then they hit a home run in Darren DeVries, who, of course, now is coaching at IU. Darren has a tremendous run, and you welcome in Ben McCollum, who takes Drake to the NCAA tournament, and they win a game over Missouri in the NCAA tournament. And now he's also in the Big Ten at Iowa. Brian Harden, who's their AD, I had the fortunate opportunity to work with him when I was at Ball State, my undergrad. He worked at Ball State there with Bill Scholl. Tremendous smart guy, and he has obviously shown that with his hires. I know there's frustration in Des Moines, especially the fact that I believe they've now lost 6 home games this year. But man, don't let the recent fortunes of having great success really take away from an extremely talented and really good head coach is there in Des Moines, and Coach Henderson's going to win there at Drake.
Same frustration that's going on in the 618. I can promise you that. We know all about, expectations and look, again, from a coaching viewpoint, in the 80s, we wanted to be on television. Well, guess what? Every one of our games are on television now. Okay. Then in the 90s, we wanted our salaries to increase. Well, they've really increased a lot, but we got to have better facilities. And this isn't just, I'm not just talking about Southern, I'm talking about across the board, across the country. Well, guess what? We all got into the facility war. We all got better facilities. Well, but man, what if we could really make it better for our student athletes? Well, now we're paying these guys. Guess what happens every time you get what you want, every single time, from being on television to better salaries for coaches to better facilities and salaries now for players. Those expectations keep going up, and it's just the way it is. And you know what? It's fair, because you know what's happening with the fans? They're paying the price one way or the other. Ticket prices have not gone down from the 80s to now. And quite frankly, I'm a consumer, whether it's we go out to dinner or go out for entertainment. In return, you want quality for your investment. And that's the way it is. And that's what us as coaches and players, we got to come to grips. We are really in a business model now. And with that, you have to produce. Coach Henderson's finding it out. It's fine. He signed up. That's it. That's the difference. I don't feel great for my wife and the wives that have to kind of listen to that stuff. But the reality is their husbands signed the contract, and we're fine. Trust me, Eric Henderson is just fine. It's why God made our ears go a certain direction, because that's a bounce off the back and never reaches us. You certainly don't need to be on social media if you're coaching. And if your family's on it, tell them don't share it with you. But all that aside, that's part of the gig. That's the way it goes. And here's the other part, and I'll close it out, that segment on this. You don't want it any other way. When I was at Southern Indiana, Bruce Pearl won a national championship in 95, and that was the standard. And it's still the standard. And you say, oh, come on, they're in the OVC. Trust me, those people want to win, and they want to win big. And every year they want to do something different. Same with Southern Illinois, same with Drake. That's part of what makes our league good, because our fans, even though they're not showing up in groves to see this talent, like I think we should be inviting them more to be doing, they're paying attention, and they expect something for their return.
Let's welcome on the head coach in his first season in Des Moines, Eric Henderson. So great to welcome on this guy to our podcast for the first time. He's in his first year as the head coach at Drake, and it shouldn't be any surprise that we have two longtime Jackrabbit head coaches going at it here on Wednesday night inside Banterra Center with, of course, head coach Scott Nagy for the Salukis and then Coach Eric Henderson for the Drake Bulldogs. Coach Henderson, thanks so much for the time. Great to have you on. You know, it's funny. I was talking about with Coach Watson before you came on. When you are around the halls here, you can clearly still feel the impact that Bruce Weber, Matt Painter, Chris Lowry, Rich Heron, the names throughout the years. I'm sure for you being in Brookings, man, Scott Nagy is a name that you could feel his impact when you were there as well.
Yeah, you're so right, Luke. And obviously, not just following Scott, but TJ was in between us. It was really, and how Scott was able to turn things around and from the transition from Division II to Division I and really go through some lean times and come out on the other side and getting South Dakota State to really what it is today is really remarkable and says a lot about him. I never was able to coach with him, but you know, obviously the community of Brookings loves Coach Nagy and the impact that he's had on the community and the young people that have come through South Dakota State. And through that, I just, you know, honestly have a lot of respect for him and how he goes about his business. You know, he's a guy that believes in what he does and really loves to help young people achieve their goals and dreams. And how can you not be for something like that?
Look, everyone has talked about, and as they should, I mean, the success that Drake has had previously to you coming in from Nico for 1 year, obviously Darren now at Indiana, Nico at Minnesota, and then Ben this past year, now at Iowa. I mean, you brought up TJ, Scott. I mean, what was it about Brookings and SDSU and basketball that whether the coach changed different, all of you guys were different in your own way, but also what was a key fabric piece that you still feel like, man, that you're taking with yourself and trying to implement at Drake?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's a lot of similarities between, you know, South Dakota State and Drake. And at the end of the day, to me, it's all about people and people that care about, you know, helping young people. And that's really what it was at South Dakota State. Like you said, Coach Nagy, TJ, myself, we all did it in a little bit different way, but there was still a culture that the community created, a culture that the alumni created, a sense of pride that it was to put, you know, the Jackrabbit logo on your shirt and you played a certain way. And that's what I felt like at Drake too. You know, the people, the alumni, whether it's the administration, whether it's the fans and the community support, or the alumni that just have so much pride in the Drake Bulldogs. That's you know why ultimately I decided to come to Drake. And obviously we've taken some bumps on the chin and. You know, obviously, you know, we did at South Dakota State too. You know, I remember my first year with TJ. Heck, we were, I think, you know, halfway through the season, we were in dead last. And I remember TJ asking me, he says, Hendo, me and Coach Clank, Hendo, what happens if we don't make not the NCAA tournament, but the Summit League tournament? And we're like, TJ, that ain't an option, bro. Let's keep working and let's figure this thing out. And you know, fortunately, we had great players. You know, obviously Mike Dom was a part of that team was incredible, and we ended up, you know, striking a niche and ended up winning the Summit League tournament and going to the NCAA tournament our first year. And I'm not saying that's going to happen here at Drake this year, but there is a lot of similarities to that year and this year that we're experiencing here at Drake. And we've been knocked on the chin, but I can promise you this: our spirit. It has not been broken, and we've never felt defeated. It's our guys have incredible resiliency. You know, we bounce back in practice almost every single day, and sometimes it doesn't always transfer over to the games. But if you continue to do that in practice, eventually it will. And sometimes you just have to, you know, tweak. You never know what little tweak or what little niche finds that little magic potion, and it can turn quick. And we've been close many times, and we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep trying to find ways to make it work.
Coach, what's been your impression of the Missouri Valley now that you're right in the thick of it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got asked that question a lot, Rodney, and you talk about tradition, you talk about history. I'm not sure many leagues in the country have a better history and tradition than the Missouri Valley Conference. The arenas that you go to, the towns that you go to, they all have a sense of pride in their university, right? And the support is pretty special every place that I've been so far. And I'm fortunate enough to play a fair amount of them when I was at South Dakota State, so I had an idea. But the coaches in this league are terrific. They seem to have their teams prepared. There's a lot of close games. So you can never get too high or too low because the next one's probably going to be a battle as well. And it's been a fun experience, and we're going to keep battling. I know that, Coach.
Times are certainly changing for everyone, certainly different than when I coached. And I'll back up. You never played our team's partner because there was a reason why we weren't playing those Jackrabbits, anything you guys were a part of. But the thing that's just is striking to Luke and I is year after year, the talent level, the individual talent level, whether it's freshmen or guys that end up in the NBA. I mentioned just on a podcast that I was at a game. I was at the Pacers game on Saturday, and two Missouri Valley players were in this game. What about the freshmen in this league and the overall talent in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the climate of college basketball is in a unique spot, and it's changed a little bit, and especially with the transfer portal and honestly with guys getting, extra years and things like that. A lot of the power, 4 or 5, power 4, power 5, however you want to look at it, they're very, very, portal heavy, and they're plucking guys from our leagues all the time. And when that happens, you probably can find a little bit, maybe more of a talented younger player, now more than ever. And I think you're seeing that especially, the Missouri Valley Conference. You look at the impact freshmen and young kids are having on their teams. It's pretty special. And, it was hard. We brought a couple freshmen with us that were committed to us at South Dakota State. And we're redshirting one of them, and one of them's getting some minutes now. But we're going to continue to look at that route too. Try to find freshmen that you feel like can have an impact right away.
When you look at the league this year, Coach Enders, you mentioned it. I mean, as soon as you said so many close games, I mean, I tell Rodney every time when we're in the middle of a broadcast, I'm sure Michael Admire for you guys too, when you go to ESPN and you hit refresh, I always tell them, don't be shocked. Because those scores could read in so many different ways. But we were trying to figure out, really the best way to describe it feels like this year more than other, a lot of the teams, I'm sure as coaches, you never feel like your team specifically knows what your identity truly is. And a lot of that's credit to the other coaches in the league. But how much would you really describe the league this year? There's a lot of teams that really know who they are. And they really try to get the game to play to their strengths.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Luke. And you can tell, for the most part, what every team's trying to get accomplished, right? And like you said, what their identity is. Now, when a lot of teams in the Missouri Valley Conference had to bring in a lot of new players, so the consistency isn't always there all the time, but you can see what's trying to get accomplished. And the challenge is trying to, take away some of the other team's strengths and putting a scouting report together to put your team in the best position to win. But I do feel like, Luke, especially now when you have so many new players that come in every year, I do feel like you probably worry about your own team a little bit more than you ever have. Hey, let's focus on us. Let's focus on our team and how we're playing together. How are we connecting? And a little bit less of, hey, let's adjust to our opponents. No, let's make sure we're true to ourselves first. And let's make sure we do build that identity. Let's make sure we are true to ourselves. I mean, that's what we're trying to do too. I mean, I don't know if everybody's doing it, but that's been a focus on our team. Let's make sure we worry about our locker room first before we worry about anything else.
Coach Henderson, I can remember it was before I got to SIU, I was at Indiana State with head coach Josh Schertz. And one of the guys that he brought in, of course, was Eli Shetler, who's on your team now. And I'm telling you, that summer for Eli, which was his first freshman summer, that was a dude that clearly everybody was like, he can fill it up. tons of potential and was really excited for him. He was on a loaded team, of course, that year. Didn't get a chance to play. The next year on another loaded team with Drake to be able to go and win the Valley tournament. Now, I mean, of course, just coming off 8 threes against Belmont was huge for you. I'm sure you've seen a lot of the same things I have, just now much more mature. How big of a piece can Eli be for your team as you continue to progress throughout the year?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It kind of came full circle because I recruited Eli pretty heavily at South Dakota State, and so got to know Eli and his family, fairly well, and obviously went to Indiana State, which whatever, it's good for him. And then when I've been able to coach him, no surprise, the first thing that stands out is the character, how he treats other people, is an incredible teammate and just goes about his business so maturely, and celebrates others, which is that's what stands out first. But then his ability to stretch the floor, is pretty remarkable. And um, I think his MO coming out of high school and maybe even his early years were, well, look how thin he is. Can he play in, physical enough to defend and rebound and those sort of things. And I think, you've seen him change his body, and that just, all the credit goes to him with the work that he's put in, and he's going to be a tremendous, and already is starting to be that, a tremendous player for us. And I knew when Will went out, pretty much more than likely for at least an extended period of time, moving Eli into the starting lineup would change our team a little bit. Our ability to space the floor, our ability to, I knew we were going to shoot more threes, which is cool with me. But his ability to space the floor, and there's some guys in our league that it's really unique. You got the Lumblade kid, you got the kid at Indiana State, where they are snipers, and Eli has that in him, and he has a quick trigger. He can get his feet set quickly, and those guys are weapons. And when you have to chase them guys all around the floor, that certainly opens things up. But I say all that, and as you know, Luke, being around him, it all starts with his character and the person that he is.
Coach, we don't mind you going to Indiana to get players, but we don't appreciate when you go to Tuscola and Whitney Young in Chicago to steal some from our home state. Tell us about Quinn and Thomas. Man, they've been impactful for you.
Yeah, they really have. Both of those guys have. Jalen got off to such a great start for us, and he's been terrific. He's obviously dynamic, getting downhill. Kind of, it's getting a little bit of a skid, right now, I'd say. But I knew that was going to happen. Brought my point guard in from South Dakota State, Owen Larson, and I knew bringing him back in and putting him in the lineup mid-year, there would be a little bit of a lull. There would be a little bit of a transition period, and that's affected JQ a little bit. We're working through some of those things, and still having him be so impactful. He can guard, he can get downhill. He's improved his 3-point shooting. He's been terrific, and then Jay Sean, I have to give Jay Sean a lot of credit. I mean, he got off to a really slow start, almost the opposite, right? And, just the conversations that I was having with him and about letting the game come to him and not trying to force things, man, his ability to listen and his ability to not only listen, but then carry it over to his game, which may be even more difficult, was incredible. He's so much more efficient the last, month. He's taking better shots and he's scoring more points for us. That's usually what happens. And so, I'm just very, very proud of Jay Sean, especially from his slow start and then where he's at right now, just with the efficiency. But both of those guys have been terrific.
It's amazing how good teams have a guy that's sometimes third, fourth, fifth, maybe even sixth on the scouting report. But as coaches, we know how critical they are because they have the it factor. It sure seems like Wilkins Jr. exact has the it factor. When will you get him back? And would you agree with me that he does have an it factor, and what is it?
Yeah, he does. I mean, he just gives you a presence. He's a team-oriented guy. He brings some physicality. And knows, you feel bad for our team, but more importantly, you feel bad for Will, right? And he's battled injuries the last couple of years, and for it to impact him again, that's you just have a lot of empathy for him. I have to go through that again. But as far as the return to play, it's probably going to be a little bit more of a longer term deal than it is short term, and which is unfortunate. So we're hoping to get him back by the end of the year, but you just don't know at the end of the day and how he reacts to some different things. So he certainly does have that, and we miss him, but we're not making excuses. We don't want anybody to feel sorry for us. We're a next man up mentality. We believe in our kids, and we're going to continue to battle. And I can tell you this: our team's going to continue to get better. And we may not win every time we go out on the floor, but I know what effort we're going to give.
Coach Henderson, I think that leads into really what my next question was to you is it's one thing to say those things. It's another thing to live it. And it's really hard to live it when you can go through the wide range of emotions that your team has, from going to Peoria. And Coach Watts have said, man, there's been so many games where you feel like you're in it, and then all of a sudden Bradley just pounds you, and the score is what the score is when you're there in Peoria. And you turn around and you play so well against Belmont, lead by 20. There's a lot of good things your team did to get to that point. I know didn't close it the way you wanted it to, but that's where, man, what do you make sure with you and your staff that the Valley is going to grind you up regardless? Even the teams that find ways to ultimately win, it is a grinding process. How do you make sure you and your staff are rooted in what you really believe is essential to your program? And to have that belief that you said is make sure that doesn't waver day to day.
Yeah, I mean, you have, and the way we look at it is, you have to stay true to our core values, right? And when you only determine success based on wins and losses, I think that's when you get all those highs and lows, and there's a lot of ways to determine success. Obviously, we haven't won as many games as we would have liked, but that doesn't mean we're not having success. Our group has made strides, and we've had two times this year where I really was disappointed in our group. Obviously, you talked about Bradley, right? That one we just our spirit was not where it needed to be. And then the second half against Illinois State, we battled our tails off in the first half and just didn't feel like we matched the physicality that we needed and the connectivity that we needed in the second half. And those really are the only two moments. I mean, you don't hear me say, I know what happened against Belmont, but yeah, we did some really, really good things, and that can't be lost sight of just because you lose the game. And, obviously we're disappointed and it stung and it still stings. But our group, as long as we stay true to our core values, you're not going to break us. You're not going to break us. We're never going to be defeated. And that doesn't mean things don't hurt. That doesn't mean you're not disappointed. That doesn't mean it's not painful. But you're not going to lose our spirit, and we're not going to be defeated as long as we stay true to our core values.
I know it's a big credit to you, Coach Henderson, but of course, the best teams, I'm sure you can even speak to it when you're at SDSU, your best teams are typically player-led teams. And there are always guys on your team that, as Coach Watson said, maybe aren't really high on a scouting report. This guy I'll bring up to you is because of what he's done this year. But there's so much more that Damian Mayo impacts than just stats. He is a true heart of the team. Who would you on your team describe as, man, maybe not overwhelming in any stat category, but there is so much more that they bring to the table that maybe for people like me and Ronnie that just look at stat sheets from afar, that unless you're there each and every day, you don't truly know how important they are to the DNA and the fabric of your team?
Well, I'll say this. You can see that. You can even see that about the Mayo kid on film. You can see the impact that he has on that group. And when it's pretty impressive. But we've got one that's pretty obvious too, I think. The Andrew Aaliyah kid is a warrior. He doesn't always lead you in, rebounds or points or whatever. But I know one category that he's going to lead us in, and that's 50-50s. That's celebrating his teammates. That's connecting our group. And like you said, they don't always get the accolades or whatever, but they are the biggest factor in probably winning and losing. And Andrew's been that for us, and he takes a lot of pride in that front of the jersey with the bulldog on that logo, and the way he plays is pretty contagious. And I know our guys love him, and I know how impactful he is on our group.
Coach, as you go into this, maybe we're not quite in the second round of this thing. I think we're in a stretch. I know Southern's got 14 games in 42 days. From a coaching standpoint, where are you now, regardless of record? I mean, you could be undefeated right now, or you can be in the spots you guys in Southern are in. How do you approach this next stretch in the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's just enjoying the moment. I mean, that's what these kids have to embrace, and to me, there's a lot of teams that are in very similar boats to what Southern Illinois, Coach Nagy's team is, and my team. We're very similar spots, right? And teams can go one or two ways at the end of the day. Are you going to be thinking about what's next, or are you going to be enjoying the moment? And if you can enjoy the moment, and if you can enjoy your teammates and not worry about what's next, your team can continue to learn and grow and get a little bit better, because that's what we need to do. Coach Nagy would say the same thing, I'm sure, about his group. We need to play a little bit better. We need to shrink those margins, because those margins from where we are at and maybe the teams that are maybe a little bit have won a few more games than us is a lot smaller than people think. And so how can we continue to find little ways to shrink those margins? And if you can enjoy the moment, you can embrace your teammates and love each other, you have a chance to continue to shrink those margins. And if you don't, I'm not sure you do. And so that's what we're going to focus on, is just enjoying the moment, celebrating each other, and really just trying to put our best foot forward every time we step on the floor.
Coach Henderson, before we let you go, we really appreciate the time. When you look at the game on Wednesday night, no doubt the strength of Southern has been attacking the paint and getting to the rim and being able to produce at the rim. No doubt that's always a clear objective for any team that Southern plays. What does impress you about how that is such a vocal point of what SIU does, but it can be a vocal point for other teams, but what does Southern to make it such a key vocal point?
Yeah, I mean, they're relentless. I mean, they're relentless with it. And it's like it kind of goes back to Coach Nagy and the respect that I have for him, to be honest with you. He puts his guys in the best position to be successful. And he knows that's what the strength of his team is. And he's going to put him in spots to make that happen. And it's not easy. You're looking at scouting reports and, hey, well, we got to keep him out of the lane. Well, no kidding. No kidding. I mean, that's pretty apparent. Easier said than done there, Hendo. And so it's just, kind of a battle of wills a little bit, and making sure, you try to keep them out of there. But for us, it's, we also don't want them just to be comfortable, right? You want to protect the paint, but if they're just sitting out there and they're comfortable, that doesn't feel good either. And so there's a mix that you have to think about in that sense. And then ultimately, like I know how Coach Nagy thinks in part, like who's going to win the rebounding battle at the end of the day is probably who's going to have a really, really good chance to win this basketball game.
Man, it's like you two know each other really well. It's amazing.
Well, I know Coach Klink and him worked together for a long time, and I'd always pick Coach Klink's brain. Hey, how'd you do it with Coach Nagy? How'd you do it? Because obviously the success he had. So I didn't work with him, but I know a lot about how it's been.
Well, and I know his respect level for you is extremely high. And I can remember when you got hired and he said, look, that's a darn good coach that's taken over Drake, and no doubt will continue to show over time. Coach Henderson, we really appreciate the time. Number one, for coming on. We look forward to welcoming you into the arena on Wednesday night, and let's do it. Let's have another Valley primetime fight here on Wednesday night.
All right. I'm sure it's not going to be any different than what you're talking about, Luke.
Big thank you to Coach Eric Henderson for taking time to join us as we get ready for this game here on Wednesday night in the Drake Bulldogs. And we talked about his team with him, Coach Watson, but let's just dive into it a little bit more. Drake enters 8-9 right now in the season. They are 2-4 in the Valley. Their last two games have been really completely different. Bradley They were down by as many as 30, did not go their way, 93-66, which when we talked about how there's been many games where we've been in Peoria and how it can get away, we understand how it can get away in Peoria, especially against the Bradley Braves. And then Belmont, a game they led by as many as 25, and Belmont came all the way back to win. But this is a Drake team that's been really led by Jalen Quinn for the majority of the year. Quinn's been outstanding transferring into the program.
Yeah, Tuscola native. Came to Drake for 1 year to finish up there. A guy that's really strong. He's a strong guard. He has the ability to put a lot of pressure on a defense, especially when they clear a side and get the ball finds him the second time down the lane. He can get to the free throw line. He's certainly a very capable shooter. He's not living at the three-point arc, but like everybody on Drake's team, that's a huge part of their identity. They feel like those numbers will play out for the season. They're shooting 37% overall from three-point line. Quinn is really the head of the snake, in my opinion, along with Jason Thomas from Whitney Young out of Chicago, and another who's leading them in scoring in conference play in those 6 games. Another, 1-2 punch out of 6'3" guards. Those two are going to be a handful for the Salukis.
There's no question a guy who's starting to heat up and really get into his own routine and rhythm in a game is Eli Shetler. Eli Shetler was recruited to Indiana State. I knew him. He was part of that team how about that? He's won 2 Valley titles with 2 different programs. He was with Josh Schertz at Indiana State, won the regular season title there, transfers to Drake. They win the Big Ten. They win the Missouri Valley Conference title, of course, under Coach McCullum. He's been around winning. He's been a part of really good programs. And how about 8 threes in the near win against Belmont? Comes up short, but I'm telling you, Coach Watson, I've seen it firsthand. I understand practice from 2 years ago to now is completely different, but it's starting to show in games. If you give Eli Shetler any sort of daylight, he can make you pay, and he can heat up in a hurry like he showed against Belmont.
Southern's got to give the same effort to Shetler that they did Shorter for Murray State. Southern knew that Shorter was a true three-point shooter. Shetler, 84 shots from the three of his total 102 for the season. He's a guy that he'll come in and spoil your day. Another guy that's going to be down the list on the scouting report just by sheer numbers, but you got to pay attention to a player like Shell, especially, obviously after making 8. That's an easy one. But, man, you got to give him hard attention all day long. You got to make him put the ball on the floor.
Andrew Aaliyah is another guy that's come into the program that has performed at a good level for him. Again, a lot of his KenPom numbers may not be overwhelming, but when the ball gets in his hands, he really is effective.
When you have a team like nearly all teams in the Valley that are a one-possession team, where so many of your games are going to be decided on 1-2 possessions, when you have anybody in that scouting report that's averaging 6.5 points, you've got to make sure that they don't reach beyond their average. You've got to hold those guys in a position. A guy that is a multiple level scorer. I don't get all caught up in the sexy 3-level scoring thing because the NBA guys do that. But these guys, while he does score inside the arc and outside the arc, he's been 2 out of 3 from the free throw line for the season, but obviously capable to score in multiple places. This guy's a guy that you got to pay attention to as well.
Oku Federico, only a sophomore, but man, you want to talk about someone that's got a presence in terms of being a rim protector. He can no question do that. And when he gets the basketball close to the rim, he's a guy that's going to finish at a really high clip.
Yeah, and he's not scared, and they're okay with him shooting threes, even though his clip isn't really high, but he's definitely long, will score at the rim. The other thing that makes him good is he's a capable passer. He's a terrific rebounder. He really goes the offensive boards hard. Southern's got to put a body on him all night. Can't play patty cake with a guy like Federico.
You look at this Drake team offensively, when you look within the league, they're right in the middle of the pack. The better offensive teams in the league, Murray State leads the league. Belmont second, Illinois State third, Bradley fourth, and then Drake's right there at fifth. Really the biggest difference for Drake, and where it's probably been different, not probably, the numbers show it. I know that's probably been a frustration for Coach Henderson. We just talked to him about defensively is where Drake has struggled this year. They are 10th out of 11 teams right now in terms of defensive rating within the league. What does Southern have to do to continue to make Drake struggle on the defensive side?
You got to reverse the ball. They back that up. That's not the first thing that should have come out of my mouth. And because you've got to attack all the time. You've got to attack the rim. You've got to put pressure on the rim. And when it's not there, you've got to have a presence. And it's part of the problem Southern's having in turnovers. They're trying to create something when the defense is there. So many of their turnovers, and I don't care if it's one or all 15 in the last game, which it wasn't. When you're turning the ball over without ball reversal and it's happening in the lane, you're not recognizing or playing. We talk about playing with 2 feet. Man, you got to play with 2 eyeballs. You got to play with your eyes up and see where the defensive help's at. And that's an area where Southern struggled to stay away from turnovers, because here's the thing that's misleading about this Drake team. They are solid in the lane. Because they have length, they have a 7-footer they're going to play. Federico's 6'9". They have strong, big guards. Southern's got to reverse the ball when the immediate direct line to the basket isn't there, and then make Drake's defense shift from one side to the other. Coach Maiman will talk to us about helpline defense and the pack defense. Now, I question when I hear fancy terms like pack line. Dick Bennett played the pack line. Bob Knight ran the motion. Rick Byrd ran the motion. I hear coaches talk about motion. It doesn't resemble what I grew up watching. No offense to any of those guys, but the reality is Southern's got to make Drake's defense shift as tight as it might be. They know they're going to play a man-to-man zone defense. There are plenty of holes against any zone defense, no matter how tight you make it, especially when you reverse the ball. Because, look, Southern will make open jump shots. So they'll make open threes. They're great at making open mid-range twos. Southern's got to make sure they take care of the ball by playing with their eyes up before they play off of 2 feet.
When you think of this game, and like you said, Coach Watson, one of the areas it's going to be, not to say it's completely drastic different styles, but when you look at the average number of shots that these teams have, of course, Southern is the only team in the league that has over 40-plus two-point attempts a game. They average right around 44 twos per game. You flip that, of course, threes per game. It's the fewest in the country. Only 16 threes attempted per game for SIU. It's almost completely flipped for Drake. They average just around 26 threes a game. In terms of two-point shots, they're only at 32, 31.9. That's drastically different in terms of how these teams really try to construct their offense and where they take their shots.
That's the thing I love best about this Saluki team, and I'm telling you, Luke, it's why we're in every game, because we are smart with where our shot selection comes from. I mean, we're not great, as I just mentioned, about playing with our eyes up and staying away from turnover trouble inside the arc. But we are really smart in going and being really wise in where our shot selection comes from. 16 a game, I don't care what that number is. 20 is about the number Southern should look for in terms of, that should be not, you're never going to max anything, because again, I talk about how shot clock has so much to do with your shot selection, but Southern's really wise with their shot selection. That is part of our identity, and we got to stay to that strength along with rebounding and getting more opportunities off of offensive rebounds.
And Drake, they've been shooting right around 35% from three within league games so far this year. Again, that's about halfway. Belmont still pacing the league in terms of league games, shooting almost 41% from three. And that's who the Salukis will see later on this weekend against the Belmont Bruins on Saturday. But first things first, a big game here on Wednesday against the Drake Bulldogs. Our coverage will begin at 6 o'clock on Wednesday night, which means tip will be at 7 inside Banterra Center. We hope you join us and make your way into the arena. If not, we always welcome you on the Saluki radio call. For head coach of the Drake Bulldogs, Eric Henderson, taking time to join us. For our Hall of Fame coach, Ronnie Watson, I am Luke Martin. We will talk to you Wednesday night, Saluki Nation. Go Dogs!
This has been Saluki Royalty, the official podcast for Saluki Athletics. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review however you listen. The preceding has been a Learfield presentation on the Saluki Sports Network.